Chapter 28 Dark Celebrity. Everyone was invited, and when the Overblade sets forth an invitation, it was not to be ignored, which meant the stadium would most certainly be filled to capacity. Goddard had put out a public call to all souls under the umbrella of his influence. It was a rare thing for a scythe, much less a powerful scythe, to have anything to do with ordinary people. Communications with the rest of humankind were usually limited to bullet, blade, bludgeon, and the occasional poison. Scythes simply didn't feel the need to speak to the masses. They were not elected officials, and had no one to answer to besides one another. There was no reason to win over the hearts of the people when your sole purpose in their lives was to stop those hearts from beating. So when Overblade Goddard himself personally broadcast the invitation, people everywhere took notice. In spite of his fortified tower, Goddard claimed to be a scythe of the people, and here was the evidence. He was willing to share his triumph with ordinary people in all walks of life. In the end, people's craving to be close to the continent's most celebrated sights was stronger than the fear of them. Tickets were gone within 5 minutes of being made available. Everyone else would have to view the event in their homes and places of business. And for those lucky enough to get tickets to the execution, they knew they'd be witnessing history. They could tell their children and their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren and their great-great-grandchildren that they were the day that Scythe of the Fair was gleaned. They didn't fear Scythe of the Fair the way Scythes did, but they did despise him, because not only did they blame him for the death of Endure, but also the silence of Thunderhead, and their own unsavory status. The world was being punished for his actions. He was, as Goddard so bluntly put it, the receptacle of the world's hatred, so naturally they would so have been forced to witness his turbulent. There were no longer such things as armored vehicles. Most vehicles were impenetrable by nature now. Even so, a special transport truck was built in a matter of days for Scythe of the Fair, complete with visible steel rivets and barred windows. It was a straight line on a high-speed highway from Fulcrum City to Mile High City, where his gleaning would take place. But the road the motorcade took was a serpentine meander that passed through as many mid-American cities as possible before arriving at its destination. A drive that would have taken a day took nearly a week. Rowan knew his gleaning would be exploited for its public relations value, but he had not expected to be flaunted in this way. There were more than a dozen vehicles in the motorcade, members of the Blade Guard on motorcycle, fancy limousines in the colors of the high-ranking sites that rode within, all leading up to the big, boxy, armored truck, and followed by a few more motorcycle guards, trailing behind like a bridal train. The Overblade himself was not present, even though the first limo was royal blue and studded with glimmering stars. There was no one in it, but the Messiahs didn't know that. The truth was, Goddard couldn't be bothered to take a long, laborious journey when he could get the same effect by just pretending to be there. He wouldn't have to show up until the actual day of the gleaning. Instead, he put Constantine in charge of escorting the dread Scythe of the Fair to his ultimatum. Constantine, Rowan knew, had been in charge of finding him and taking him down 3 years ago. His crimson robe and his limousine were the same color as the public enemy stamp on the side of Rowan's transport truck. He wondered if that was intentional, or just a happy coincidence. Before they left Fulcrum City, Constantine had paid Rowan a visit once he had been loaded into his high-security truck and chuckled. "All these years, I wanted to lay eyes on you," Constantine said. "And now that I do, I am profoundly unimpressed." "Thanks," said Rowan. "I love you too." Constantine reached into his robe as if to grab a blade, but thought better of it. "If I could clean you here and now, I would," he said. "But the ire of Overblade Goddard is not something I wish to arouse." "Understandable," said Rowan. "If it's any consolation, I'd rather be cleaned by you than by him." "And why is that?" "Because for him, my death will be vengeance. For you it would be satisfying a 3-year mission. I'd much rather satisfy that than Goddard's vendetta. Constantine took that in stride. He didn't become any softer, but he no longer seemed on the verge of an explosion he would regret. Before we drive you to your well-deserved end, I want to know something, Constantine said. I want to know why you did what you did. Why I ended Sides, Renoir, Fillmore, and the rest. He waved his hand. Not that. As much as I detest your scythe ending spree, it's obvious why you chose the ones you did. They were all questionable sides, and you passed judgment on them, even though it was not your judgment to pass. Those crimes are more than enough reason to clean you, but what I want to know is why you killed the Grandslayers. They were good men and women. The worst of them was Xenocrates, but even he was a saint compared to the others you ended. What possessed you to do such an unspeakable thing? Rowan was tired of denying the blame. What did it matter at this point? So he gave Constantine the lie that everyone already believed. I hated the Scython for denying me the ring, Rowan told him, and so I wanted to damage it as much as I could. I wanted every Scython around the world to pay for refusing to make me a true scythe. Constantine's glare could have melted through the steel of the transport track. Do you expect me to believe that you are that small-minded and petty? I must be, said Rowan. Why else would I sink and endure? Then he added, or maybe I'm just plain evil. Constantine knew he was being mocked, and he did not take it well. He left and had nothing more to say to Rowan for the entire journey, but not without the grimmest of parting shots. It is my pleasure to tell you that your cleaning will be a painful one, the Crimson Scythe said, oozing bitterness. Goddard intends to roast you alive. Rowan had brand new shiny shackles that had been forged just for him, steel chains that clanged on the floor of the transport track when he moved. They were long enough to allow him plenty of mobility, but solid enough to make it hard to actually move. It was beyond horrible. Just because he had a knack for sleeping free did not make him the escape artist they thought that he was. All of his previous escapes were due either to someone helping him or the incompetence of the people detaining him. He wasn't exactly going to bite through the chains and kick open the steel door, yet everyone acted like he was an otherworldly beast with superhuman, supernatural powers. But then, maybe that's what Goddard wanted people to think. Because if the creature you captured needs to be chained and locked in a steel box, you must be one hell of a hunter. In every city and town they passed through, people came out in droves to watch the motorcade go by, as if it were a holiday parade. The barred windows in the transport track were at various heights, larger than ought to be on an armored vehicle, and the interior was brightly lit. Rowan soon came to realize the reason for this. The windows were placed so that no matter where he positioned himself in the track, he could still be seen from the outside, and the bright interior ensured that he would not be hidden in darkness, no matter the time of the day. As he rolled down boulevards and main streets, there was always a view of him for the gauntlets of local laws on either side. Occasionally, he looked out of a window, and when he did, the crowd's excitement peaked at his speaking. They pointed at him, took photos, and held up children to see the young man who had become a dark celebrity. A few times he waved to them, which got people tittering to one another. A few times he pointed back at them when they pointed at him, which always seemed to scare them, as if his hungry restless ghost would come for them in the middle of the night once he was cleaned. Through all this, Constantine's bleak pronouncement kept coming back to him. The manner in which Rowan would be cleaned. Hadn't cleaning by fire been outlawed? Goddard must have reinstated it. Or maybe he brought it back just for this one special cleaning. As much as Rowan tried to tell himself he didn't fear it, he did. Not the cleaning, but the pain, and there would be quite a lot of it, because Goddard would most certainly turn off his pain nanites so that Rowan could feel every last measure of misery. He would suffer like the heretics and witches of more ignorant times. The idea of his life ending was not much of a problem for him. In fact, it had become an oddly familiar theme. He had died so many times, and in so many ways, he was used to it. It held no more terror for him than falling asleep, which was often worse, because when he slept, he had nightmares. At least, being dead was a dreamless state, and the only difference between being dead and being dead was the length of time involved. Perhaps, as some believed, true death ultimately brought people to a glorious new place, unimaginable to the living. In this way, Rowan tried to soften the prospect of his fate. He also tried to soften it with thoughts of Citra. There had been no word of her, and he wasn't foolish enough to ask Constantine, or anyone else for that matter, because he had no idea who knew that she was alive. Goddard certainly knew. He had sent the hybrid of Usmerica to retrieve them both, but if Citra had escaped, the best way to help her was to not speak of her in hostile company. Considering where Rowan's winding path was leading him, he could only hope she was in better circumstances. Chapter 29. The Obvious Bear. 3 dates. That's all that was within the folded zone. One in the year of the lynx, a second in the year of the bison, and the third in the year of the heron. All years before she was even born. It didn't take long for Anastasia to figure out why those dates were important. That was the easy part. Whether people knew the actual dates or not, the events they marked were part of everyone's history curriculum. But on the other hand, those were the official accounts, the accepted ones. Nothing in history was a first-hand account, and things known really meant things that were allowed to be known. Ever since becoming a scythe, Anastasia had seen how the Scython throttled back the flow of information when it felt the need, defining history any way it chose. Perhaps not falsify things, for the Thunderhead did have jurisdiction over facts and figures, but the Scython could choose which facts were fed to the public. Modern information selectively ignored was not forgotten. It still existed in the backbrain for anyone to access. In the days of her apprenticeship, Citra had become an expert at sifting through the Thunderhead's backbrain when trying to find Scythe Faraday's killer. The algorithm of the Thunderhead's filing system were much like the human brain. All order was by association. Images weren't organized by date, time, or even location. To find an ivory scythe standing on a corner, she had to sort through images of people in ivory standing on corners everywhere in the world, then narrow it down by other elements of the scene. A particular type of street lamp, the length of shadows, the sounds and scents in the air, because the Thunderhead cataloged all sensory input. Finding anything was like finding a needle in a haystack on a planet of haystacks. It took ingenuity and inspiration to figure out what parameters would narrow down the near-infinite field of information. Now, Anastasia's challenge was even greater than before, because then she knew what she was looking for. Now she knew nothing but the dates. First, she studied all that was known about the disasters in question. Then, she plunged into the backbrain to find original sources and information that had been conveniently left out of the official records. The biggest obstacle was her own lack of patience. She could already sense that the answers were in there, but they were buried beneath so many layers she feared she'd never find them. As it turns out, Anastasia and Jerry had arrived just a few days before the lunar jubilee. On every full moon, Highblade Tenkamenin threw a huge party that lasted 25 hours. Because 24 simply isn't enough. There were all forms of entertainment, hordes of professional partiers, and food flown in from around the globe for his invited guests. Dress for the event, but without your sides, Rob. Stay by my side with a party person or two. Tenka had advised her. You'll just be part of this scenery. To Jerry, the Highblade just said, enjoy yourself within reason. Anastasia was reluctant to even be there, for fear of being recognized, and would much rather have continued her search through the backbrain, but Tenkamenin insisted. A break from the drudgery of dredging will do you good. I'll provide you with a colorful week, and no one will be the wiser. At first, Anastasia thought it was irresponsible and foolhardy to suggest a simple disguise could conceal her, but since the last thing anyone was expecting was a long dead scythe to show up at the party, much less one wearing a neon blue wig. She was remarkably hidden in plain sight. "A lesson for your research," he told her. "That which hides in plain sight is the most difficult thing to find." Tenka was the consummate host, greeting everyone personally and granting immunity left and right. It was all stunning and fun, but it didn't sit well with anesthesia, and the High Blade read her disapproval. "Do I seem wastefully self-indulgent to you?" Tenka asked her. "Am I a horribly hedonistic High Blade?" "Godard throws parties like this," she pointed out. "Not like this," said Tenka. "And he likes his homes larger than life, too." "Is that so?" Then Tenka beckoned her closer so she could hear him more clearly amid the revelry. "I want you to take a look at the people before you and tell me what you see. Or, more to the point, what you don't see." Anastasia took in the view. People in a multi-level pool, others dancing on balconies, everyone in bathing suits and bright party clothes. Then she realized there are no sides. "Not a one, not even Macadam, Baba. Every guest is a family member of someone I cleaned since the last full moon. I invite them here to celebrate the lives of their lost loved ones, rather than to mourn, and to grant them their year of immunity. And when the celebration is over, and the grounds are cleared, I retreat to my glorious suit." He indicated the largest window in the mansion, then winked and slid his finger to the right, until he wasn't pointing at the palace anymore, but to a small sack at the edge of the property. "The tool set?" "That's not a tool set," he said. "It's where I live. The palace suites are all reserved for honored guests like yourself, as well as guests who are less honored, but need to be impressed. As for my tool set, as you call it, it's a replica of the home I grew up in. My parents believed in simplicity, and of course they had a son who enjoyed endless complication. Yet I still find comfort at night in the pleasantness of a plain dwelling." "I'm sure they must be proud of you," Anastasia said. "Your parents, I mean." High Blade Tenka sniffed at the suggestion. "Hardly," he said. "They took simplicity to an extreme. They're Tonists now. I haven't spoken to them in years." "I'm sorry." "Did you hear the Tonists had a prophet?" Tenka said bitterly. "He appeared shortly after you took your deep dive. They claim the Thunderhead still spoke to him." Tenka gave a ruffled chuckle at the thought. "Of course he got himself cleaned." A waiter approached with a tray of shrimp that appeared too large to be real. No doubt the product of the Thunderhead's experimental abundance farm. As always, the Thunderhead got it right. They tasted even better than they looked. "How are your efforts going?" Tenka asked her. "They're going," she told him, "but the Thunderhead links things in confusing ways. I pull up an image of the Mars colony, and it takes me to a child's drawing of the moon. A news report from the New Hope orbital station leads to a launch order in Istanbul from a site I've never even heard of. Dante something or other." "Alighieri?" said Tenka. "Yes, that's it. Do you know him?" "I know of him. From Euroscandia, I believe. He's long gone. Must have self clean maybe 50, 60 years ago." "It's like every other link I found. None of them makes sense." "Go down every rabbit hole," Tenka advised. "Because some of them might actually have rabbits." "I still don't understand why you can't just tell me what I'm looking for." Tenka sighed and leaned close to whisper. "The information we have came from another site before she self-cleaned. A clearing of her conscience, I imagine. Other than that, we have no actual evidence, and our own digging through the back brain has been fruitless. We're being hindered because we know what we're looking for. While one searches for a man in a blue hat, one totally misses the woman in a blue wig." He gave a little flip to one of her neon curls. Although it was counterintuitive, she had to admit it made sense. Hadn't she seen Tenka walking toward the tool set each day? But her own assumptions never allowed her to guess the reason. She recalled a Mortal Age video a teacher had once shown her class. The objective was to count how many times a ball was passed between teammates shifting around the screen. She got the answer right, as did most people in class. But everyone completely missed the man in a bear suit who danced his way right through the middle of the scene. Sometimes finding the obvious means coming in with no expectations. The next morning, she had a breakthrough and ran to Tenka's cottage to let him know what she had uncovered. His home was modest in a way that even Scythe Faraday would have approved of. She found Tenka in the middle of something. Directly in front of him were two other people, not looking all that happy to be there. More than unhappy, they were miserable. "Come in, my friend," Tenka said when he saw Anastasia. "Do you know who this is?" he asked his two other guests. "No, Your Excellency," they said. "She is my florist," he told them. "She fills the palace and my home with the most lovely arrangements." Then he focused his attention on the more nervous of the two, a man who seemed to be nearing 40, perhaps ready to turn a corner. "Tell me your dearest dream," said the High Blade. "What do you want to do more than anything in the world, but have not yet done?" The man hesitated. "Don't hold back," prompted Tenkamenin. "Don't be modest. Tell me your dream in all of its glorious glory." I want a sailing yacht," he said like a little boy on Father Holiday's lap. "I want to sail it around the world." "Very well," said the High Blade, clapping his hands once, as if that sealed the deal. "We'll go shopping for sailing yachts tomorrow. My treat." "Your Excellency?" the man said, incredulous. "You'll have your dream, sir. 6 months of it. Then you'll return here to tell me all about it. And then I will clean you." The man was ecstatic. In spite of being told that he was going to be cleaned, he was happy as could be. "Thank you, Your Excellency, thank you." Once he had left, the other man, a bit younger and less frightened than he was before, turned to the High Blade. "What about me?" he asked. "Do you want to hear my dream?" "My friend, life can often be most brutal and unfair. Death is the same." Tenkamenin sunk his hand in a quick arc. Anastasia never even saw the blade, but in an instant the man was on the floor, clutching his neck, releasing his last breath. He had been cleaned. "I will alert his family personally," Tenkamenin told Anastasia. "They will be invited to the next lunar jubilee." Anastasia was surprised by the turn of events, but not shocked. Each side had to find his or her own way of doing things. To realize one random soul's dream while denying another's was as reasonable a method as any. Switching good sides to a whole lot worse. The cleanup crew came in from another room, and Tenka escorted Anastasia out to the patio, where breakfast was waiting. "Did you know that you were my inspiration?" he told her. "Me?" "By your example, actually allowing people to choose their own method of cleaning and giving them notice ahead of time. Unheard of, but brilliant. Such compassion is lacking among us. We're all about efficiency, getting the job done. After you were lost in Enduro, to honor you, I decided to change my cleaning style. I would allow half of those I clean to first live their dream." "Why just half?" "Because if we truly are to emulate death as it once was, it must be fickle and capricious," he said. "One can only sugarcoat it so much." Tenka filled a plate with eggs and fried plantains, and set it in front of Anastasia before making a plate for himself. How strange, thought Anastasia, that death has become so commonplace for us sides that we can take life and take breakfast in the next moment. Tenka took a bite of cassava fufu, chewing the dense bread as he spoke. "You've not cleaned once since you arrived. Understandable under the circumstances, but you must be itching for it." She understood what he meant. Only New Order sides truly enjoyed the act of cleaning, but others would feel a bugged but persistent need if they went too long without it. Anastasia couldn't deny that she'd come to feel that too. She imagined it was the way one's psyche adjusted to being a scythe in the first place. What I'm doing in the back brain is more important than cleaning, she told him, and I think I found something. She told him what she had uncovered. A name. Gerson Lask. Not exactly the mother lode, but a starting point. He's listed as a survivor, but there's no record of his life after that date. Of course, it could be a mistake, and he actually died with the others.
Tenka smiled proudly. The Thunderhead does not make mistakes,
He reminded her.
It's a solid plate. Keep digging.
He eyed her plate, then scooped more plantains onto it, like a parent concerned with their child's skimpy eating habits.
We would like you to start making live broadcasts,
He told her.
Rather than us officially telling the world you've returned, we think you should do it yourself. Sighed Anastasia, in her own words.
I'm not much of a performer, she told him, and thought back to her awful performance in Julius Caesar. She was only on stage to clean the lead actor, as per his wishes, but she still had to act the part. She was a terrible romancenator, except for the stopping part.
Did you speak your mind and your heart to the grounds lawyers when you brought your inquest?
Tank asked. Yes, admitted Anastasia.
And our friend Scythe Posuelo tells me that, in spite of what the world believes, you convinced them to make Scythe Corey Highblade of Mid-America.
Anastasia grimaced involuntarily at the mention of Scythe Corey. Yes, I did.
Well, if you can stand before the seventh stage of consideration and argue a case to the most intimidating college of sites in the world, I think you'll do fine.
That afternoon, Tenkamenin took her off the compound to show her the city he was so proud of. Port Remembrance was bustling and full of life, but the Highblade did not want her to leave their car.
The Jubilee is one thing. It is a controlled environment, but out here, there's no telling who might see you and recognize you,
he said. But it turned out there was another reason he didn't want her to leave their vehicle. As they neared the center of town, they began to encounter Tonists. First, just a few, but soon they started to gather on either side of the road, glaring at the High-Blade's car. Anastasia had mixed feelings about Tonists. The less extreme ones were alright, friendly, and often kind, if somewhat persistent in the pushing of their beliefs. Some, however, were insufferable, judgmental, intolerant, the opposite of what Tonism claimed to be about, and sibilants made other zealots seem tame. That was the brand of Tonism that had taken root in Tenkamenin's region.
Ever since the toll was cleaned, these splinter groups had become more and more extreme,
Tenkamenin told her. As if to prove his point, when enough of them were gathered by the roadside, they began to throw stones. Anastasia gasped when the first stone hit the car, but Tenkamenin wasn't perturbed.
Don't worry, they can't do any damage, and they know it. I'm sorry you have to see this.
Another rock hit the windshield, split in two, and bounced off. Then, all at once, the attackers stopped throwing stones and began to intone, emitting a droning, wordless wailing. Yet somehow this was different from other Tonists he had heard. Tenkamenin ordered the car to put on music, but even so, it didn't entirely drown them out.
This entire sect has taken a vow of silence,
Tenkamenin told her, not hiding his disgust.
No speaking, just this blasted ugly noise. The Thunderhead had always frowned on the linguination, but when the Thunderhead fell silent, these Tonists decided they could do as they pleased, which is why their howling sounds even worse than usual.
Delineation? Asked Anastasia.
I'm sorry,
said Tenkamenin.
I thought you understood. They've cut out their tongues.
Gary was not invited on the tour of Port Remembrance. While the captain's crew indulged in more free time than they'd had in years, Gary remained in Tenkamenin's compound, keeping an eye on Anastasia, making sure she was being treated well and was kept safe. Gary was never a selfish person, always putting the crew of the Spence first. That was a good captain's way. The desire to look out for Anastasia went beyond it. Tenkamenin was a careless man. Yes, he provided protection for Anastasia, but was his stuff butted? And the fact that he practically flaunted Anastasia's presence at the Lunar Jubilee made Jerry wonder whether the Highblade had any common sense whatsoever. Jerry didn't trust the man, and knew the feeling was mutual. And then came Anastasia's sibilant afternoon in poor remembrance. Anastasia came to talk to Jerry about it when she returned, unable to keep it all in. Each day it's like I'm hit over the head by how much the world changed while I was out of it, Anastasia said. The world has survived wars, Jerry told Anastasia, while she endlessly paced. We survived the mortal age. What could possibly be worse than the horrors of that? But she would not be consoled. Yes, but without the Gruntslayers, Scythons are practically at war with one another, as if it were the mortal age all over again. Where are we heading? Upheaval, Jerry said matter-of-factly. Mountains are created by upheaval. I'm sure it doesn't look pretty at the time. It only aggravated her further. How can you be so calm about it? And Tenkamenin's even worse than you. He just accepts all this like it's nothing. Like it's a passing shower instead of a hurricane that's going to tear everything apart. Why is everyone so blind? Jerry sighed and put a hand on Anastasia's shoulder, forcing her to stop pacing. This is why I'm needed here, Jerry thought. To be the second voice in her head, wrangling in the panicking one. There is opportunity in every disaster, Jerry told her. A ship goes down, that's when I get excited, because I know there are always treasures in the wreckage. Look what I found at the bottom of the sea. I found you. And 400,000 scythe diamonds, Anastasia pointed out. My point is, you need to approach this like a salvage operation. In salvage, the first thing we do is carefully assess the situation before we make a move. So, I should just sit by and watch? Observe, learn everything you can, and then, when you do move, you move decisively. And I know, when the time comes, you will. Highblade Tenkamenin insisted on formal dinners every night. His entourage of sides was expected to be there, as well as his honored guests. And since Anastasia's and Yuri's arrival, Tenkamenin made sure there were no other guests. It was one thing to throw a party for locals, and another to expose Seth and Anastasia to dinner table scrutiny. When Yuri arrived that night, Anastasia was already there, along with the Highblade and Scythes, Baba and Makeda. The Highblade himself was laughing uproariously at something someone had said, or more likely, something he himself had said. While Anastasia enjoyed the man, Yuri exhausted of him after their first day.
You've missed the first course,
he told Yuri.
No soup for you.
Yuri sat beside Anastasia. I'll survive.
House rules dictate that you be on time for dinner,
Tenkamenin reminded.
It's a matter of common courtesy.
It's Yuri's first time late, offered Anastasia. You don't have to defend me, Yuri told her, then turned to the Highblade. I was being updated on the jury salvage, if you must know. They found the council somber. The Gruntslayers' seats of consideration are being sent to their respective continents to be turned into monuments. I think that was a little more important than soup. Tenkamenin did not comment, but 5 minutes later, during the main course, he prodded Yuri again.
Tell me, Jericho, how does your crew feel about having an absentee captain?
Yuri would not be baited. They are on leave in your city, and grateful for it.
I see. And how do you know they are not out making deals without you? Deals that might compromise the security of our dear Lady of the Deep,
he said, using his latest pet name for Anastasia. Do not cast aspersions on my crew, Your Excellency, Yuri said. They are loyal to a fault. Can you say that of the people you surround yourself with? That raised the Highblade's hackles, but he did not defend his entourage. Instead, he changed the subject.
What do you want out of life, Captain Sobranius?
That's a broad question.
Then let me rephrase it. Tell me your dearest dream, Eureka. What do you want to do more than anything in the world, but have not yet done?
Suddenly, Anastasia dropped her silverware so hard that it chipped her plate, and ceased to dab. I've lost my appetite, she said, then grabbed Yuri's hand. And so have you. And she stormed away, leaving Yuri no choice but to go with her, if only to keep the hand. Behind them, Tenkamenin burst out laughing.
It was a joke, Anastasia, and you know I love to toy.
She turned long enough to spur him the harshest of glares. You're an excellent Your Excellency, which only made him laugh harder. Yuri was not entirely sure what the inside joke was until they reached Anastasia's hut, and she closed the door behind them. It's what he asks people he's going to clean, she said. Ah, said Yuri. He did it to get a rise out of you, which he did. The High Blade enjoys pushing people's buttons, and he knows exactly where yours are. Not at all, Yuri told her, because as much as he likes to toy with you, he doesn't want to turn you against him. If he gleans me, he knows he'll be your enemy. Even so, she held out her hand. The one with the sides ring. It wasn't her old ring. That one scythe Pozuelo had hurled back into the sea after they found her, since it could be used to trace her whereabouts, if there was actually a scythe out there who understood their own technology. Pozuelo had given her a new ring using one of the diamonds from the vault. Kiss it, Anastasia said to Yuri, just to be safe. So Yuri took her hand and kissed it, missing the ring entirely. Anastasia pulled her hand back reflexively. I mean the ring, not the hand. She held it out again. Do it right this time. I choose not to, Yuri said. If I give you immunity, no one can glean you for a year. Do it. But still Yuri made no move. And when her eyes questioned, Yuri said, when I found the Vault of Relics and Futures, Pozuelo also offered me immunity, but I refused him as well. Why? What possible reason is there? Because I don't want to be indebted to anyone, not even you. She turned away at that and went to the window, peering out. There are things out there that I don't want to know about, but I need to know about them. I need to know everything I can. Then she turned back to Yuri. Have you heard anything about Rowan? She asked. Yuri could have told her that there was no news, but that would be a lie, and Yuri would not lie to Anastasia. They had too much trust between them to jeopardize it. Yuri was silent for a moment, and Anastasia pushed. I know Tenkamenin wouldn't let any news about him reach me in here, but you've been in touch with your crew. They must have told you something. Yuri heaved a sigh, but only to prepare her for the answer. Yes, there is news, but nothing I'm going to share, no matter how much you ask me. A progression of emotions passed over her. The stages of grief all played out on her face in a matter of seconds. Denial, anger, bargaining, sadness, and, finally, a resolving into acceptance. You won't tell me because there's nothing I can do, she said, anticipating the reason Yuri would give, and it would distract me from what I need to do. Do you hate me for it? Yuri asked. I could say yes, just out of spite, but no, Yuri, I don't hate you, but can you at least tell me if he's still alive? Yes, Yuri said. Yes, he is. I hope you can find comfort in that. And will he be alive tomorrow? She asked. Not even the Thunderhead can be sure about tomorrow, Yuri told her. Let's be satisfied with today.